two Sephardi tunes to the Hallel yesterday.
Yes.
Which I've never heard before, but the Sephardim all seem to know it.
Yeah, and also he, as you pointed out, he sang Hodu to the tune of Hatikva.
Lovely.
And as you also pointed out, that we would not have heard that in MH on Erev Yom Ha'atzmaut, or any other time for that matter. Right, enough of this nonsense. Let's get on with, let me mute you all for the moment. There we go. Let's start where we left off. We're in Shmuel Aleph, chapter 19. And we had this rather pathetic, in the true sense of the word, pathos, this rather pathetic sight of King Saul trying to capture David HaMelech. No, he's not a David HaMelech yet. Capture David. Oh, there's another Shaul. Where's that, Paul? You muted. I couldn't hear you.
Thessaloniki.
Oh, I can't even say that. That looks very nice. It looks very nice. I like the stained glass windows there as well. Beautiful. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do for the next shir. Everybody has to put on their background a particular favorite shul of theirs. Okay, that's what we will do for next week's shir, please God. Although I'm not sure, we might not have one next week because Bezrat Hashem will be having a Brit, but we'll see. Anyway, let's go back to Shmuel Aleph. We've had this rather pathetic sight of Shaul trying to capture David, sending messengers, sending another lot of messengers, and then a third lot of messengers, and finally going himself, stripping off his clothes, prophesying, having this episode of ecstasy, and then we ended last week's shiur with this saying here, Hagam Shaul ban Vi'im, which was the bookend to the exact same words with which Shaul's kingship began. So we see that the Tanach is really giving us a very clear indication of the descent of Shmuel from the great, sorry, not Shmuel, Shaul, from the great potential that he had to the end of his career, which ended in disgrace, really, stripped naked, lying on the floor with a bunch of other people. Really very, very sad, really very, very tragic. A question that crosses my mind, and we've had this discussion a little bit previously when we were talking about Shimshon, and that is, why do people call their kids Shaul? He was a flawed character. I mean, a seriously flawed character, and failed to live up to his potential. Knowing what we know now, I don't think I would call one of my kids Shaul. Whether or not any of my 3 new grandchildren are going to be called Shaul, I don't know. But if they are, they are. It's not a name that I would choose based on this. I mean, they may be named after every Shaul that we know, may be named after a fine person who was Shaul. But the original Shaul here, I don't think Tanach paints in a very positive light. And it's surprising that people use that name Shaul, surprising to me at least. Before we leave this chapter, I just want to point out a few other little things. And this is the messenger business over here. It seems that if you look in Tanach, that the sending of messengers seems to have a negative connotation most of the time. We spoke last week about the messengers that were sent by Yaakov to Esav. You could argue that that was a positive thing because he was trying to bring shalom between the brothers. You could also argue that it was a negative thing because they weren't telling the truth. These messengers, they were being sycophantic. But leave that one aside. The messengers that were sent by Balak, king of Moab, to Bilam, we mentioned that last week as well. And I want to mention some other ones now, which we haven't yet come across, but we will be coming across very shortly. Well, not that shortly, but in a few weeks, months, however long it takes us to get there. And it's in the next book of Shmuel. It's a story that you're all very familiar with. It's another rather tragic story, a story that doesn't leave a good taste. And that's the story of David and Bathsheba, which you're all very familiar with. Let's just have a quick look at that. I'm just going to share the screen with you. I'm not going to share chapter 19, where we're up to at the moment. I'm going to go straight to Shmuel Bet, chapter 11. Let me share that with you now. Those of you who've got a Tanach in front of you, you can look at that. Chapter 11 of Shmuel Bet.
Weren't the angels that went to Abraham described as messengers?
They were described as malachim. Now, as we mentioned, malachim can be either angels or they can be messengers. With Abraham, they were angels. They were proper angels.
Yeah.
But they were messengers as well. That's true. And of course, they were positive messages. But those were sent by Kadosh Baruch Hu. Those were not messengers sent by human beings. So I think we can describe them in a separate category. Let's have a look. Can you see the screen? Is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So here we go. I've got it ready for you. Jeffrey, have you got your Tanakh there? Chapter 11 of Shmuel Bet. You're muted at the moment, Jeffrey. You're muted. Jeffrey, we can't hear you.
Is this David and his people mourn?
No, this is chapter 11 of
Oh, that's verse
Bet.
11. I beg your pardon, Johnny. I'm on verse 11 there. So
verse 3.
Shmuel Bet 11. Verse 3. David sent to inquire about the woman, and someone said, "Is this not Bathsheba, daughter of Eliyahu, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David sent messengers and took her. She came to him and he lay with her. She had been cleansing herself from her impurity. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived. She sent a message in which she told David, "I have conceived." David sent a message to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." So Joab sent Uriah to David.
Stop there. How many cents are there in that little paragraph there? Let's have a look. Verse 3, David sent, that's one, and inquired about the woman. And he said, "Is this not Bathsheba?" Verse 4, and David sent messengers, that's 2, and he took her and she came to him. Verse 5, and the woman conceived and she sent messengers, that's 3, and she told David and said, "I'm pregnant." David sent to Joab, that's 4. "Send me Uriah the Hittite," that's 5. 5 times the word sending is involved in there. And then later on,
you missed the last one.
Did I miss one? Oh, and Jacob sent to Uriah to David. Yes, you're right. So that's 6. So the concept of sending messages here is definitely a negative aspect here. This is a negative story. And we see that this idea of sending, and it mentions it again later on here in verse 14, when he's trying to get Uriah to be killed in battle. Jeffrey, verse 14, please.
And it was in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by Uriah's hand.
Again, there we are, a message sent by the hand of Uriah. And verse 27, David, Jeffrey, please.
The morning passed, and David sent for her and brought her into his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. The deed that David had done was deemed evil in the eyes of Hashem.
So there we have sending again. So this chapter of the story of David and Bathsheba, which ends with, well, the story doesn't end, but this particular part ends with a very clear statement. Vayera hadavar asher asa David be'enei Hashem. The thing that David did was evil in the eyes of Hashem. This evil deed of David's, which we will discuss in detail when we come to it, I'm not going to go into it now, is absolutely full of the concept of sending messengers. So we go back to our chapter now, chapter 19, and we see that this was full of sending messengers as well. Shaul sent messengers to get David. He'd already run away. They found him in Navot, and then he sent messengers again. Then he sent messengers again, and then he sends another lot of messengers. So this idea of messengers being sent is a literary method of Tanach to give us a clear feeling of how Tanach views this whole business of Shaul's dealing with David, and it's Vayera hadavar be'enei Hashem. It's not explicitly stated here, but if you look at the comparison between these two stories, then you can imply, you can learn, you can deduce. We could even make a Gezerah Shava, couldn't we, if we were allowed to? Those of you who were in the shiur on Wednesday will know what I'm talking about. We could make a Gezerah Shava, couldn't we, on Vayishlach, Vayerad hadavar b'nei Hashem. The matter was evil over there with the Vayishlachs, and here Hashem is not impressed with Shaul's behavior. And so
nothing's changed, has it? It's all WhatsApps now.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it? It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to send a message than to actually do something yourself in person. If you've got something unpleasant to say to somebody, and this is one of the problems of social media that we see in today's society. Those of you who are aware of these things, maybe with your grandchildren, social media bullying of children is a massive problem. Massive problem. There are many children and adolescents, particularly, who are suffering terrible mental health problems from that stem from online bullying. And it's very easy to bully online because you send a message and you're hiding behind it. If you've got something unpleasant to say to somebody, it's quite difficult to say it to their face, because most people are decent folk, and a person feels uncomfortable saying something unpleasant to somebody else. It's a lot easier to send a message, and this is what's happening, especially with young people. Horrible things are being said that they wouldn't have said necessarily face to face, and they are being said online, and people are living their lives online, and the sending of messages can be very, very problematic. So it's just, you're right, Johnny, nothing's changed. And in fact, if anything, it's got worse, because it's a lot easier to send messages today. They had to actually send messages with messengers. Now we can just send a WhatsApp, and it's very easy. So, that's a very good observation, Johnny, that this is nothing has changed here. We now leave chapter 19, but before we do so, we can see one more. There's one more episode of sending that I want to show you just before we go off this, and it's a bit later on in Melachim, and it's to do with the prophet Eliyahu Navi, and it's in Kings 1. Jeffrey, if you want to find Kings 1, Melachim Aleph, chapter 1. There it is on the screen for you. There was a king called Ahaziah, and he became ill. He had a bit of a fall through from his roof, fell through the cracks. Have you got it, Jeff?
Getting there.
Chapter 1 of Kings 2.
Oh, Malachim Aleph, yeah?
Malachim Bet.
Oh, Malachim Bet. Sorry.
I think it was my mistake. Malachim Bet, chapter Aleph.
Right. Malachim Bet is, and you want verse 2?
Verse 2.
Okay, well, may as well read verse 1. Moab rebelled against Israel after Ahab's death. Ahaziah fell through the balustrade of his upper chamber in Samaria and took ill. He sent messengers saying to them, "Go inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, whether I will recover from this illness." An angel of Shem then said to Elijah the Tishbite, "Arise and go up towards the messengers of the king of Samaria and speak to them. Is there no God in Israel that you go to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron?"
Let's stop there for a second. So Ahaziah was one of the kings of Israel. This is after the split of the kingdom between Israel in the north and Judea in the south, Yehuda and Israel. This is a king of Israel, and he gets ill, and he sends messengers. There's that sign, that same sentence, Vayishlach Malachim. He sends messengers to this foreign god, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Hang on a minute, what about me? What about me?" And so he sends Eliyahu Hanavi to intercept these messengers, and he says to them, "Hang on a minute, why are you going to this god of Ekron? Have you not got your own god? What about Hashem?" And so carry on, verse 4, Jeffrey.
Therefore, thus said Hashem of Ahaziah, the bed on to which you have climbed, you shall never go down from it, or you shall surely die. Elijah then set off.
Right, so let's stop there. So Eliyahu Hanavi sends a message and says, "You're on your sick bed. You're not going to get off that sick bed. You're going to die." And the reason, of course, is not because you fell through the roof, but because you chose to go after other gods. And so then what happens? Verse 5.
The messengers returned to Ahaziah, and he asked them, "Why have you returned?" They answered him, "A man came up towards us and said to us, 'Go and return to the king who sent you and speak to him. Thus said Hashem, is there no God in Israel that you send to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore, the bed onto which you have climbed, you shall never go down from it, for you shall surely die.'"
Okay, so they go back to the king and they tell the king what Eliyahu Hanavi has done. And then verse 7 and 8, Jeffrey.
He asked them, "What is the appearance of the man who came up towards you and spoke these words to you?" They said to him, "He was a hairy man with a leather belt girded on his waist." Ahaziah said, "He is Elijah, the Tishbite."
Okay, let's stop there. If we'd have seen that today, they'd have probably said it was Bobby Lieberman, hairy man with a leather belt. But anyway, it wasn't. It was Eliyahu Hanavi, right? And so what did he do? What did the king do? Carry on, verse 9.
So Ahaziah dispatched him a captain of 50 along with 50 men. He came up to Elijah, and he was sitting on the top of a mountain. He said to him, "Man of God, the king has spoken. Come down." Elijah responded and spoke to the captain of the 50. "If I'm a man of God, let a fire descend from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. A fire then descended from heaven and consumed him and his 50 men.
Okay, stop there. So he sends messengers and they don't return. So happens that they got burnt to death, these lot. Very similar, though, isn't it, to the Shmuel and Shaul situation. Shaul sends these men after David. They become prophets and they don't return. So what does Shaul do in our story? He sends another lot. And what does this Ahaziah do? Verse 11.
Ahaziah repeated and sent another captain of 50 along with 50 men to him. He spoke up and said to Elijah, "Man of God, thus said the king, come down quickly." Elijah responded and spoke to them, "If I am a man of God, let a fire descend from heaven and consume you and your 50 men." The fire of God then descended from heaven and consumed him and his 50 men.
Okay, and so what did Shaul do when the second lot didn't come back? He sent a third lot. And what does Ahaziah do?
He does the
Verse
same
13.
thing. Ahaziah repeated and sent a third captain of 50 men, along with these 50 men. This third captain of 50 went up, arrived and fell on his knees in front of Elijah and entreated him and spoke to him, "Man of God, please let my soul and the souls of these 50 servants of yours be worthy in your eyes. Behold."
Stop there. So this one has got a bit more seichel than the others. And he comes to Eliyahu Hanavi and he says, "Whoa, hang on a minute. Don't." He says no. He doesn't want to do what the king has said. So this is not quite even as bad as what Shaul's lot did. So you can see from this story that Ahaziah, who was a person who did not believe in Hashem to the degree that he sent messengers to go and ask of a foreign god whether he was going to recover from this illness, and he sends these messengers 3 times. The same story as with Shaul. So we can see this Shaul sending messengers business is comparable to David HaMelech with the Bathsheba story, something which was Vayera Hadavar B'nei Hashem. It was bad in the eyes of Hashem. It's comparable to the Ahaziah story, where he sends exactly the same idea, 3 lots of messengers. The first 2 don't come back, and he keeps on sending. And so we can see that this whole story, this bizarre story of Shaul sending messengers, is a very clear indication from Tanach of the depths to which Shaul Nebuch has fallen from his great heights of the potential that he had. So we're going to leave Shaul now for the time being, because the next chapter that we're going to go into is going to concentrate on the relationship between David and Shaul's son, Jonathan. And it's a complex relationship.
Johnny, can I just ask you why these men were burned and not turned into prophets or something?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. There's a whole section in the Radak comparing Shmuel and Eliyahu. And I was thinking about whether to go into all of that, because it's quite interesting to see the difference between Shmuel and Eliyahu. But I decided I wasn't, because I wanted to get on with the story. Right. But briefly, very briefly, the bottom line there is that Eliyahu was a very harsh prophet. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu actually is critical of Eliyahu in some respects. And that's why there is a midrash that says, well, actually it's not a midrash, it's an interpretation of the Psukim, that Eliyahu was not allowed to die. He was sent back to earth, as it were, in all sorts of guises, as it were, to do teshuvah for being so harsh on Bnei Yisrael. He makes a comment about Bnei Yisrael not being faithful to the Brit, and he's now sent back by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to go to every single Brit Milah, as it were, to view the fact that you were wrong, Eliyahu Hanavi. Look at my people. Look how they're keeping the Brit of Hashem. They're doing a Brit Milah on their children. And Eliyahu Hanavi, as we know, comes to every Brit to heal the child. He comes to heal the child. But why Eliyahu Hanavi? Because it's, as it were, HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving him his if you like, comeuppance because he was harsh against Bnei Israel. Eliyahu Hanavi didn't take any prisoners, as you can see. Shmuel, on the other hand, was a much softer character. Shmuel was a much more accommodating person. Shmuel was not fire and brimstone. You know, we're all different. You see this today, don't you? You see some preachers who are all fire and brimstone, and you see some other preachers who are much more soft in their approach, and it depends on personality. And Eliyahu's character was a very, very much a harsh character, and he wasn't having any of this with these people. This king had gone against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he wasn't having any of it. The same business when he went to the prophets of Baal at the Har Carmel, the famous story of Eliyahu. There's fire and brimstone going along, people being killed, and all sorts of things. This was Eliyahu's manner. He was a very harsh and powerful and fiery prophet. Shmuel, on the other hand, was much softer, much more accommodating. So
he didn't burn the people. Hashem burnt the people.
Yeah, but he
could have
was
burnt
the one
could have burnt one of them as a miracle.
He's the one that said, "If I'm a prophet, let fire come down." So what's Hashem going to do? Not burn them? And then he's shown not to be a prophet of God. He forced God's hand. Moshe Rabbeinu did the same thing with Korach.
Yeah.
Right? With Korach, Moshe Rabbeinu says, if I'm right, let the earth open up. Yeah. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu have a choice? He had no choice. He had to do it. So there's a sort of implied criticism a bit of Eliyahu's harshness here. And you're absolutely right to point that difference out. And that's sort of basically in a nutshell what the Radak speaks about in the comparison between Eliyahu and Shmuel.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to chapter 20. We'll go back to Shmuel Aleph out of Malachim, where we were before. We're back in Shmuel Aleph. I think this is 19. Let's go on to chapter 20. What we're going to see now is we're leaving Shaul behind in his nadir, really. We now, by the way, we never see again in the entire life of Shaul the words "Vatitzlach Ruach Hashem," that the spirit of Hashem, neither the good spirit nor the Ruach Ra'ah, neither this evil spirit, this depression, this melancholy, this paranoia, we don't see it again. Shaul has lost all his level of prophecy completely at this point, and he reverts to being a regular, ordinary bloke. He's no longer considered to be the king. He's had the kingship taken from him, and now he's had the Ruach HaElokim, the Spirit of God, taken from him as well. So he is put to one side for the moment, and we now move on in the next chapter to the relationship between Jonathan and David, which is a very complex relationship. As a prelude to this chapter, let's just think about the characters we're dealing with. We're dealing with Jonathan, or to be absolutely correct, Yehonatan with a hey. Jonathan, the son of Shaul, who, as we know from previous chapters, has a very strong friendship and relationship with David. Now, if you are Jonathan, you are in between a rock and a hard place, aren't you, really? Because you have to be loyal to your father, who happens to be the king. So you have to be loyal to the king, you have to be loyal to your father, and yet you see that your father is doing things which are not right. And he's seeking to kill an innocent man. That innocent man happens to be your best friend. What are you to do? If you are Jonathan, you have got a very, very serious dilemma on your hands. Do you follow your moral fiber and say, I have to challenge my father because it's not right what he's doing. David HaMelech has done nothing, or David, has not done anything to warrant being killed. It's not right. This is morally wrong, and I can't stand by and allow it to happen. Or do you say, I suppose, taking the easy way out and say, no, I've got a duty, I've got a filial duty to my father, I've got a duty to the king, and I have to sacrifice my friendship with David, and I have to see it go by the wayside. I can't stand in the way of it. And if David is to be killed and David is to be sacrificed, if you like, then I can't interfere. It's a very difficult dilemma for Jonathan. And as we said previously, out of all the characters that we see in Shmuel Aleph, to me at least, Jonathan is the most heroic. Jonathan is the most devoted, the most moral, the most ethical, and in some ways the most tragic character. I would certainly want to name a child after Jonathan, because he is a hero. In fact, one of my grandchildren is called Yoni, so I suppose that's probably about the same thing. So that's the looking at it from Jonathan's perspective. From David's perspective, he's a very perceptive guy, David. He's figured out by now that Shaul wants to put him to death. He's also got a bit of a dilemma, hasn't he? Because he's got this friend, Jonathan, who has sworn his love for his friend, sworn his allegiance to him, and yet he, David, knows full well the dilemma that Jonathan has. And how can he trust him? Can David really trust that Jonathan is going to take that massive step and go against his father, against the king, and take allegiance to David, and to, as it were, throw his lot in with David against his father? It's a big ask. And David can't be sure where Jonathan's loyalties lie, notwithstanding the fact that he has expressed his loyalty to David in no uncertain terms. David knows that despite that, this is a massive dilemma for Jonathan. And so on the background of those two characters who both have difficult decisions to make, Jonathan has the decision to make who to go in with, as it were, and David has the dilemma: if Jonathan throws his lot in with me, can I trust him? Can I trust him? Very, very difficult situation for both of them. An unfair situation. And who's at fault for the whole thing? Shaul. Shaul is unwarrantedly attacking David. He's putting Jonathan in a very difficult position. But nevertheless, that's where they find themselves, Jonathan and David. And on the background of that, we need to read this chapter, because we can read this chapter and superficially see what's going on there. But there's so much nuance in this chapter, which tells us how these characters are thinking and how they're dealing with this dilemma that I've just described. And let's go on and see how that transpires. The first thing to say is that it's a bit difficult to understand what's going on here chronologically. If we just whiz back to the very end of chapter 19, David is in Navot, or Nayot, depending how you're going to read it or it's written, in Ramah. Shaul has sent these messengers who have become prophets. He himself is a prophet now and is there with all the others. And of course, the reason he sent these messengers in the first place was to kill David. And it's a bit difficult, therefore, to understand what's going on at the beginning of chapter 20. Let's read the first pasuk of chapter 20 and see what's going on. I'm just going to, while Jeffrey's reading that, I'm just going to mute myself and take this call. But Jeffrey, if you could read the first two psukim for us, please.
Then David fled from Naboth in Ramah.
Yes.
He came and said before Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my iniquity and my sin before your father, that he seeks my life?" He said to him, "It would be a sacrilege. You shall not die. Behold, my father does not do a major thing or a minor thing without revealing it to me. So why should my father conceal this matter from me? Is it not so?"
Okay, so let's go to verse 1. Vayivrach David minayot. Now, David fled from Naot. There's that word vayivrach. We've had it a few times already. He did, in modern parlance, he did a vayivrach. He ran away. Okay, all right, Jeffrey, he did a vayivrach.
A runner.
We've had a few of those. Right. So he did a vayivrach.
Why are there no vowels in the word miniyot? Well, not in mine anyhow.
Because of the Korean Ketiv, Johnny.
Okay.
It's read in a different way to it's written.
Yeah, I can see on the screen.
And then you can see, if you look at in the Steinsaltz, usually it has the way it's written.
Yes, it
at
has.
The side.
Yes, it has. Thank you.
So he ran away from Naot. Why did he run away?
I thought he was going to be killed.
Yeah, he thought he was going to be killed. By whom?
By Shaul.
By Shaul, correct.
Yeah.
And so we know this story that we're going to see, don't we? We know this story because it's the story that we read on Erev Rosh Chodesh for the Haftorah. You'll all be very familiar with this story when we get down to it in a few psukim time. This is the story of David and Jonathan on the Rosh Chodesh meal. Now, what we see from this is that David was expected to sit at the meal with Shaul. And yet, the chapter begins with the word Vayivrach David. David ran away. Well, if he ran away, what's the last place he would run to? Shaul's palace, right? If you're being chased by somebody to kill you, and he sent lots of messengers to kill you, the last place you're going to show up at is his palace. So it's a bit difficult to understand what's gone on here. Now, he ran away from Navot, and where did he come to? Look at the Hebrew words. How did you translate that, Jeffrey? He just translate verse 1 again for me, the beginning, because I wasn't listening.
And David fled from Naboth in Ramah. He came and said before Jonathan.
Okay, stop there. Vayavo, and he came. Doesn't say where he came to. Vayomer lifnei Yehonatan, and he said before Yonatan. So if you read this to start with, I think the implication here is that he ran away and he met Jonathan somewhere other than Shaul's home. Because he's not going to run away to Shaul's home. That's not running away. That's not Vayivrach. Vayivrach means you're running away from somebody chasing you. So he's not going to Vayavo, come to the palace of Shaul. But he's there in front of Yehonatan. Vayomer lifnei Yehonatan, and he said before he's got a conversation with Yehonatan. So I think from this pasuk, we can assume that Yonatan at this stage has disengaged himself from the king, from his father, and has met David in some secret location, only known to those two, And this conversation that we're about to be privy to between Jonathan and David is happening somewhere on the side, somewhere secret, somewhere not known to Shaul. Because if it was known to Shaul, Shaul would have sent his soldiers to finish off David. Unless we say, which is possible, unless we say that at the end of the chapter, when he became a prophet, Shaul, he calmed down, he never wanted to, he didn't want to kill David anymore, and everything was all hunky-dory because he'd become a prophet and this evil spirit had left him, etc. That's a possibility, but I think it's an unlikely possibility. I think more likely, David and Jonathan are meeting in a secret location only known to them, and they have this conversation. Let's have a look at it in some more detail. David says to Jonathan, and it's a very tragic, almost pathetic conversation they're having. Me asiti, what have I done? Ma avoni, what is my sin? What have I done? Me chatati, what is my transgression? Lifnei avicha, what have I ever done to your father? Ki mevakesh et nafshi, that he seeks my life, he seeks to kill me. Jonathan, tell me, what is my crime? What have I done wrong? Why does your father want to kill me? And what does Jonathan say? He says, he doesn't want to kill you. And you can see here Jonathan's dilemma coming out. His initial reaction is, whoa, no. Read verse 2, Jeffrey.
And he said to him, it would be a sacrilege. You shall not die. Behold, my father does not do a major thing or a minor thing without revealing it to me. So why should my father conceal this matter from me? It is not so.
So what does he say? Very, very interesting. Look at the beginning of that pasuk. Chalila. And Jeffrey translated that as it would be a sacrilege. Here on the screen, it's translated as far be it. But Chalila, it would be a sacrilege, is a better translation than the one we've got here. Why would it be a sacrilege? Why would it be a sacrilege? Why does Jonathan describe it as being a sacrilege if Shaul was to kill David?
Because he would be killing him for no reason.
That's true, but that doesn't make it a sacrilege. That makes it a murder.
Yeah.
Why is it a sacrilege?
Kasta Khalila.
What is a sacrilege? How would we describe a sacrilege? Something which goes against a religious act. What does Jonathan know that David does not know about Shaul? What is the sacrilege? I'm just looking for the pasuk here. Okay, so what? Okay. Found it. Here we go. Let's have a look at chapter 19. Let's go back to chapter 19, the previous chapter. And let's have a look at verse 4 onwards. Jeffrey, please. Chapter 19, verse 4.
So Jonathan spoke favorably of David to his father Saul, saying to him, let the king not sin against his servant David, for he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds are very good for you. He put his life in his hand, and slew the Philistine, and Hashem granted a great salvation to all of Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. So why should you sin with innocent blood to kill David for no reason?
Verse 6.
Saul listened to Jonathan's voice, and Saul swore, as Hashem lives, he shall not die.
Okay, stop there. So what has Shaul done?
He's given
Broken his promise.
He's given an oath, hasn't he? Let's go back
Broken
to our
his promise.
chapter. He's given an oath. And who knows about that oath?
Jonathan.
Only Jonathan. That oath was said to Jonathan. David is not party. He doesn't know that. So when Jonathan says here in our chapter 20, he says to him, Chalila, it won't happen. It would be a sacrilege if that happened, because Shaul has made an oath. And we know, don't we, from previous learning, how important and how strong an oath is. Think of Yiftach, yeah? Think of the oaths that have been made in the past. So Chalila, he says, it would be a sacrilege. That's why that's such a good translation in the art scroll there. It's a better translation than we've got here. It would be a sacrilege, because if Shaul was to put was to put David to death, he would have broken a solemn oath, not just an oath, but an oath using Hashem's name. Chai Hashem. That's what he said. Chapter 19, let me just show you again what he says in verse 6. Chai Hashem. Can you see that on the screen there? Chai Hashem. As Hashem lives, he shall not be put to death. So if he then goes on to put him to death, it's as if he's killing Hashem, because he says, as long as Hashem lives, he won't be put to death. Chai Hashem. So Jonathan is right to describe this as a chalila, a sacrilege. Interestingly, though, he doesn't explicitly say to David, I know that you won't be put to death because my father swore that he wouldn't do it. Now, that's really interesting. What does he say to David in order to reassure him that Shaul is not going to put him to death? He says, I would know about it. If he plans to kill you, I would know about it, because he doesn't keep anything from me. He tells me everything, right? My father will do nothing, either great or small, that he will not reveal to me. And why should my father conceal this thing from me? It's not true. So he doesn't say to David, Chalila, it's a sacrilege if he were to kill you. He's made an oath. He's not going to kill you, so you can relax. He doesn't say that. He says, you can relax, because if he was going to kill you, I would know about it. Now, I don't think that's as powerful a reassurance as it would be to say that Shaul has made an oath that he's not going to kill you, or at least say both of them. Say, Shaul, my father told me that he won't kill you. He made an oath that he's not going to kill you. And if he'd changed his mind, he would definitely have told me. So I think it's a bit of a question here. And I'd like to suggest that this is the first reflection of Jonathan's dilemma. He is not really 100% sure that Shaul's not going to try and kill him. And so he doesn't want to paint his father in such a bad light that he would break an oath. So there's a little bit here of protection of his father's reputation, if you like, going on, as well as trying to reassure David. This is the first sort of idea that we see of this terrible dilemma that Jonathan finds himself in. And he tries to reassure him. Now we see some more swearing now. Yes, David. Yes, David.
Yes, can I just point out another parallel language between, with the Lavan story in Pasuk Aleph?
Vayivrach.
You got that. We've had that before, but Ma avonil mechatati, and in the story with Yaakov and Lavan, he says Ma pishi machatati ki dalakta harai.
Wow, excellent. I hadn't picked that one up. Well, give us the thing. It must be Bereshit chapter 31, I'm guessing.
Correct. Pasuk Lamed Vav.
Bereshit chapter 31, verse 36. There we go. Well, let's just do the Vayivrach again in this story. There we go. There's the Vayivrach, verse 21. Vayivrach, and he ran away. And then verse 36. Vayichal Yaakov. Yaakov is angry. Vayarev balavan, and he quarrels with Lavan. Vayan Yaakov, and he answers and he says, Ma pish'i. What is my sin? Ma chatati. What is my transgression, my aveira, my sin, my chata? Ki dalakta acharai, that you have run after me. So the same language there. Excellent, David. So that's another parallel between the Lavan story and the Shaul and David story. So again, painting Shaul in a negative light, comparing him to Lavan. Okay, let's go back to our chapter 20. So David's now not entirely convinced by Jonathan's reassurance. Verse 3, please, David, Jeffrey.
But David swore to him again and said, your father knows very well I have found favor in your eyes. So he said to himself, Jonathan should not know about this, lest he be saddened. However, as Hashem lives, and by your life, there is but a footstep between me and death.
Okay, now what's really interesting here is that David makes an oath now, and look at the words he uses to make the oath. Can you see that? I blued it out for you on the screen. Chai Hashem. What was the words that Shaul used in the previous chapter, chapter 19, verse 6? Where are you? Chapter 19, there you are. Verse 6, there it is again, not surprisingly, Chai Hashem, the same language. Now, David does not know about this oath at this stage, but the Tanach knows about the oath, and this is a bit of irony by the author of the Tanach, pointing us back to the oath of Shaul.
What's David's oath, Johnny?
David's oath is saying, David is saying,
yeah,
you, Jonathan, say that your father would not do anything without telling you. And I'm telling you, David says to Jonathan, that's not the case, because David knows, Shaul knows that you, Jonathan, are my friend. And so he's saying to himself, I'm not going to tell Jonathan what I'm going to do because it'll upset him. And then he makes an oath. As Hashem lives, I'm promising you, Jonathan, you don't realize it, but I promise you, there is but a step between me and death. In other words, I am in terrible danger from your father. In other words, I'm not reassured at all by what you've said. You've said to me that you would know if your father intended to kill me. I don't believe that, because he wouldn't tell you, because he wouldn't want to upset you, because he knows that I'm your mate, right? And he doesn't want you to get upset. But I promise you, you can hear this conversation in modern language. I promise you, Jonathan, I'm in real danger here. I'm one step away from being killed.
It doesn't sound like an oath.
It's an oath meaning it's not an oath to do something or not to do something. Okay, there are different types of oaths, right? There's the oath to do something. I promise by the word of Hashem, by the name of Hashem, to do X, to give this to a charity or to do that or whatever. Or I promise by the name of Hashem, I will not kill David. So that's the oath to do or not to do something. The other type of oath is to emphasize what you're saying, right? No, don't make a face, because that's how oaths work, right? We do it ourselves today. If I wanted to say to you, oh, for goodness sake, Michael, and then I was going to tell you something, for goodness sake, Michael, I don't think that's correct. You would say something and I would say, nah, for goodness sake. Well, that's an oath. Goodness is Hashem's name. You shouldn't really say for goodness sake. Some people believe that saying that is using Hashem's name in vain, and you shouldn't do it, right? For God's sake, for goodness sake, or somebody would say, I remember we had a wonderful Irish help in the house for over 50 years, Essie, who used to say, oh, by Jesus. She would use God's name in, or her God's name. Oh, by Jesus, and she'd then say some word of wisdom, right, Jeffrey?
Absolutely.
Right. So it's still an oath, right? Swearing is an oath. If you say bloody hell or other things, that's called cursing. That's called an oath. So it's a different type of oath, but it's still an oath. He's using Hashem's name. The idea of an oath is anything which invokes the name of God. And he here has said, Chai Hashem. It's for emphasis, because you don't use Hashem's name for nothing. It's one of the 10 commandments. Don't take my name in vain, which is why when we say our Al Chaitz in in Yom Kippur, in the Vidui, we say Al Chaitz Shechatati B'Shvuat Shav. We make a false oath, an oath which is not right. Not necessarily it's a false oath, but you use it unnecessarily. If you look in the back of your art scroll Machzor, you'll see that one of the explanations of one of those al chaitz is that if you swear that an obvious stone is a stone. So if you say, I swear by the name of Hashem that a stone is a stone, right? I swear by the name of Hashem that this is a cup. That's taking God's name in vain. You don't need to use God's name to say the blindingly obvious. So an oath in this context is not just an oath to do or not to do something. It's anything which invokes the name of God, which is a very powerful thing. So that's why when he says swore, we're using the English language swear, which is nearly always to swear to do something. But why is a swear word called a swear word? Have you ever thought about that? No, neither have I until just now. But actually, a swear word is called a swear word because we are swearing. It's using God's name, right? And that's not allowed. That's swearing. So despite the scrunched up face that you made there, Michael, this actually really is an oath. Okay, so he makes this oath for emphasis, and what the author of the Tanach is telling us by using this same expression, Chai Hashem, it's hinting us back to this oath of Shaul, which actually Shaul is about to try, or has already tried, and will try again to break that oath by actually trying to kill David. So we're going to need to stop there because we're out of time. But we can see this is the beginning of an extremely emotional story. It's a story that we're familiar with because of Machar Chodesh. You'll see verse 5 begins with the words of those of the Haftorah for Machar Chodesh. Vayoma David al Yehonatan Hinei Chodesh Machar, and it's you'll know that the story is familiar to you when we get to it. But it's a very emotional story. It's full of pathos, and it's the beginning of the end, really, of this relationship with Jonathan and David, because it can only end really in tragedy, and we'll see how that develops over the next few weeks. So just to recap before we finish, what have we done today? We had a look at the end of chapter 19 for a final time. We looked at the idea of messengers being sent being a rather negative approach. We compared it to David and Bathsheba. We compared it to Achaziah and Eliyahu. We spoke a little bit about the difference between Eliyahu's approach and Shmuel's approach, Eliyahu being more of a fiery character. And we spoke then, we went into chapter 20 and spoke about the beginning of this relationship between David and Jonathan and the dilemma that they both found themselves in. Jonathan, this split between his loyalty to his father and his loyalty to his friend, and David's dilemma, should he really trust Jonathan? Can Jonathan be trusted to actually go against his father's wishes? And we are going to go further on in that in the coming weeks. Be'ezrat Hashem. Any questions or comments on today's shiur? I shall stop the share so we can all see one another a bit better. Any comments or questions?
No, very good. Thank you, Johnny.
Excellent.
Okay. Shavua Tova, a reminder, we'll just stop the recording, Avril, if you would, please.